people. So thank you. You're very brave to be here, and this is the best teaching of all. This teaching and emptiness are my favorites, actually. So you're really doing yourself a favor, I think, for coming. So it's great. So I'm just thinking, I was just telling Sarah that, you know, the nature of samsara. So all week that I've been here, our cook, we have a precious cook, Nina, a lovely woman from San Jose, California. Her mother was diagnosed with cancer in January, very bad cancer. And we thought she'd have a year. We were hoping she'd probably have a year. And she just one infection to the next infection to the next infection. So it seems like, I just got an email that it seems like she's dying right now, that they decided to let her go at this point and remove the life support and things. And it just was a little, I mean, for Nina, she's very young, and she just said, I'll call her after this, because she said it's the most emotional day she's ever had in her life. And having lost my mom 2.5 years ago, so I just know what she's going through, and it just happened it happened too quickly, I think, for her to get her mind to catch up. You know, we were kind of thinking 6 months to a year, you have time to deal, and suddenly she went back just for a visit, for a 1-week visit, because her mom was just having chemo, and it was like she was going to cook for her and get her healthy from the chemo. And the day before she was coming back here, she was rushed to the hospital. You know, it just started with, one thing to, you know how things like that go. So I think her mother is headed for someplace good. I get a feeling she did a lot of purification in this life, so hopefully that'll all be done and like that. So we'll say some prayers for her at the end. And so thank you for coming. So let's take a moment and just sitting up straight, again, always setting a motivation in the beginning. It's precious to do that. It sets a great basis for whatever activity you're about to do. And so just make sure your spine is as extended as possible. And if you'd like, you can lightly close your eyes, just allowing yourself to go inward. Take a moment to check your body. Just scan your body a little bit. Take a minute or so and allow yourself to release any tension you might be holding. And just bring your awareness to your breath, a normal, natural breath. And just allow all the distractions of your day to go. Just allow your mind to settle here in the space. So there's so many other things we could be doing this evening. So just rejoice for a moment that you have chosen to come here and really do something mostly worthwhile. A great choice to make. And so let's make this time even more worthwhile by directing our attention to being of benefit to others. So for instance, you may get some information this evening that may benefit your spiritual practice. The path of associating with the right teacher actually can shortcut your path to enlightenment. So let's all quickly be able to get ourselves to enlightenment, to a fully awakened state, as then we are completely unlimited in how we can best serve all others. So the real point of why we're here right now is to serve others as completely, as fully as possible. The means for getting there is to become a Buddha. Okay, so take a moment, think about your purpose for being here. See if you can align it with a Mahayana motivation, with that motivation I just mentioned. Setting a good intention right now for this time, and putting your mind in as positive a place as possible. So please relax. Slowly open your eyes. So I just want to ask first, because the topic of tonight is about the spiritual teacher, and there is a traditional teaching I can give about the teacher and finding a teacher and about the teacher and things like that. But I didn't know it because it also said something about how I found my teacher. So I just wanted to ask what you would like to hear in general, what you're here for. You came to a class, what are you expecting? Like that, so I can make sure I cover what you would like. Both? A little bit of both?
Yeah.
Okay. So I brought this book again, from the library, Essence of Refined Gold. It's a basic Lam Rim book. Okay? Lam is path, Rim, stages. Stages of the path is our philosophy. Like that? The basis of our, overall philosophy with topics such as Guru devotion, precious human rebirth, lower realms, refuge, karma, suffering, bodhicitta, emptiness, things like that. I think you're familiar with a lot of them. Okay, so most of the Lam Rim books have a section. They all have a section about. It's called Guru devotion. Guru devotion. We hear that a lot. Guru is a spiritual teacher. And in our culture, there's a lot of fear about the guru. We think about cults, which we have in our culture, and we think somebody's going to brainwash us, we have to give all our money away, we'll be held imprisoned. And there are cults that do that, I think, and we know many people have committed suicide from these cults like that. So not at all what they mean by guru. This is really the spiritual teacher This is a guide, so let me explain that premise first. It's important to understand, if you're interested in a spiritual path, and not everybody is, and that's fine, but if you find that you have problems from time to time, and I think we all do, we want to solve the problems, right? You don't want to keep having a problem, especially if it's a repetitive problem. But sometimes we have a big problem arise, totally separate from anything. Sometimes we have lots of little problems. And then sometimes there's repetitive problems. So this is samsara's nature, problems and suffering. Okay, samsara is a Sanskrit word to cycle. What are we cycling through? Birth, old age, sickness, and death. It's all about cyclic or cyclic existence. Its very nature is suffering. That's natural, is what I'm saying. That's natural. Okay? The more we accept that, the more we understand that, the more peace you'll be. And the more you may develop some renunciation and want to get out of samsara, because you can, permanently. Okay? So what happens though is, while we're in samsara, like most of us here, things happen and you have a problem, and there's some little problems. Then you talk to your friends and your family, and then you have a big problem. And you talk to your friends and family, and sometimes you'll seek a priest. You'll go to a priest, you go to a rabbi, you go to somebody a little that you think knows a little bit more, right? I mean, it's a common thing. You may seek advice from a healthcare practitioner that you feel is wise, that has some more information, if it's an illness. It's very common, right? So for me, let's think about it right now. You have a problem and you go to your friends and family. It's the first people we turn to. Our spouse, our partner, friends, family, your closest people to you. What do they tell you? Do they fix the problem? Do they know, capital K, what you should do, best thing you should do? So they advise from whatever wisdom they have. Just like we advise. When people come to us, you try to help. You know, Nina, our cook. I try from my life experience to say, you know, things to her. I've been doing this all week with her, and the last 2 weeks or something. You know, but I don't really know fully, right? But you advise from there, okay? But I always feel limited. My knowledge is limited. So you're going to go to your friends and family, but their advice is limited. And let's face it, do you ever listen to them anyway? Right? It's amazing. You know, I have so many friends, and they come to me, and basically people want to talk. They're not really listening. I mean, I've met with a number of people here, and all over the world when I meet with students. And, you know, 60% of them, 70%, they just want to talk. And they'll say, I want this advice, and as soon as I open my mouth, they're on to the next thing. They haven't heard a word I said. So, but that's common. Most of us are like that. You hear it, and you know they're not going to listen to you. You know, your friends and family. You're not going to take the advice. Okay. And partly, I think you might not take the advice because you don't really trust it fully. You know that some people are giving you advice based on what they want you to do. Haven't you had that with conditions? Right? And some people are giving you advice based on what they think is right, but you're kind of in your mind going, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. You know, she doesn't know what she's talking about. So there's this doubt that comes up. And so the guru, if you have a highly realized teacher, my experience, and I'll talk about that, they know. You know, and you get a feeling that they know. And you follow the advice, it totally benefits your mind. Makes you happier. And so you check slowly, you try little things. So I'll explain that. But that's really the role of the really qualified guru. It could be male or female. That's their role. Their role is to get you enlightened as quickly as possible. Their role is to get you free of your suffering as quickly as possible. In fact, that's all they're really interested in for all beings on the Mahayana path. Could be their disciples, could be other people. They have full-on compassion, fully developed wisdom, loving kindness, and that's all they want to do, that's all they're interested in. That's their whole focus for everything. So find somebody like that. Okay, so on this path, this is a crux of the path, and a lot of people don't want to hear this. So probably those of you that are here are ready to hear it. And the unfortunate thing are the people that aren't here. okay? Because a lot of friends, I have a number of friends and other students and people that I've been for years going to Dharma courses with, and many of them in the beginning are like, I don't need a teacher, you know. Now there are people that don't have teachers. They do it themselves, they study, they read, they apply, and they've gotten quite far. There are people like that. And that's fine, you know, there's no problem. I've just found the teacher is the shortcut. So you can keep going along, or you can move along more quickly. I personally would like to get free quicker, more quickly. You know, because this stuff, you know, having this person lose her mother right now like this, she's so young, I'm tired of this, you know, tired of people suffering like this. So, but first I got to get myself out. That, you know, so it motivates you a little bit. You know, the suffering can motivate. So what you want to do when you're looking for a teacher, and the crux of this path is find a teacher and devote yourself to them with your mind and with your body. Serve them. However best you can serve them. Teachers, they're all different. They're all different. Even if they all look Tibetan, there's a whole group that looks Tibetan, they're all different. I have many teachers. Okay, initially, don't have many teachers. You start with one teacher. It's too confusing. You know, I didn't know that in the beginning. And you end up in initiation, I ended up with these teachings, I didn't really understand, I jumped at things. So you technically have a guru-disciple relationship with these people if you take initiations in certain things. Now, I might never see them again, but, you know, there's some relationship there. It can be the most serious relationship in your life. Okay, so what does that mean? You don't leave your husband, you know, you don't never talk to your mother again, or your kids or anything. It's just, it's like this is somebody who cares for you without any conditions. Without any conditions. I mean, the first moment I met Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he's my main teacher. So what we sometimes call a root guru. Root guru, it could be somebody, it might be somebody you haven't even met. You know, some people felt, you know, Pabonka Rinpoche who taught liberation in the palm of your hand. It was a teaching he gave, I think in 1945. There's some people that it so transformed their mind that they never met him, they felt like that was their root teacher. You know, ideally you'd have somebody you'd meet, and it's the person that kind of turns your mind significantly to the Dharma. Could be that kind of person, the person that kind of woke you up initially, that got you to pay attention. Or it could also be over the course of meeting them, or listening to teachings, or checking some information with them, over time you can realize this is the person that really, this is the one that really gets me, really gets my attention. So root guru, and then you can have other gurus. But when you talk about a guru, it's a little bit heavier than a teacher. But we have teachers on different levels. So I'll use the term sometimes interchangeably, okay? So guru, spiritual guide, it's a Sanskrit word. The Tibetan word is lama. But they actually have a slightly different significance. Okay, lama is literally one who is heavy. And what it means is heavy with realizations. So my personal preference when people choose teachers is I personally would choose someone with high realizations. Now you don't know their mind, but you get a sense if and check them out. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama says you should check for 6 years, be a spy on your guru. Like if you meet somebody and you say, I really like them, they're quite amazing, these teachings, this book, or this, there's a quality about them, check, don't jump. You know, well, they're giving refuge, I'll take refuge. And it doesn't mean it's your refuge lama is your root guru. Or, you know, that might be a teacher you took refuge with. Might not really be that significant a teacher, except that you took refuge. That's great. So check them out. You know, are they really practicing what they're saying they're doing, what they're teaching? You know, what are their students like? If they have a lot of students. What kind of qualities? Here are some qualities you're looking for. These are the qualities you're looking for, okay? First of all, the 3 higher trainings, okay? Pure morality, concentration, and wisdom. Those are 3 things called the 3 higher trainings. Pure morality, or like ethical discipline, concentration and wisdom. They should have some semblance of that. Not that they've had a realization of all, they should, so meaning pure morality or ethical discipline is about, they have a somewhat subdued mind. All three of these things would mean a somewhat subdued mind. And, you know, you don't see them going around killing insects, you know, yelling and cursing at people, lying to everybody, creating divisive speech between people, and being very, very greedy and jealous, and, you know, think about it. You know, what would cultivate what you believe is ethical discipline? But those are things that make up ethical discipline, practicing the 10 ethical guidelines, avoiding the 10 non-virtues, right? And working on that steadily. So that's the basis. They've got this good morality, right? Ideally, if you're dealing with someone with ordination vows, then they have this level of celibacy and things. So not necessarily, it doesn't mean monks or nuns are holy and all subdued at all, but there's some semblance where that layer of distractions is removed. Okay? But monks and nuns are far from perfect. Often, you know, it's true. Like we always think, I know some people get really, when you're new especially, you have this idea about what a Dharma center's like, and what monks or nuns are like, and people would be like, oh, you know, he does that? Like, you know, he drives? Yeah. You know, they'll have some ideas, and it's like, yeah, you know, there's no vows against that, right? Like, when people have these ideas, like you should, you know. So ethical discipline, concentration, okay? Concentration is a level of meditative absorption. It doesn't mean that they have shine, calm abiding. It doesn't mean they've realized shine, but a level of mind that's relatively subdued, possibly quite satisfied with what it has, less distractions, you know, not constantly like, oh, I need this now, I want that, you know, not having any focus to what they're talking about doing, things like that. Concentration. Do they spend time meditating? Do they spend some time, a little bit? You know, you may not know exactly, but sometimes you can, there's a quality. Okay? Wisdom. So it doesn't mean they've had a direct perception of emptiness, the nature of reality, but maybe they have a very good understanding if they haven't had a direct perception of emptiness. My preference is I want a guru that's had a direct perception of emptiness. It's different. It's different. But people have teachers on different levels, and people are karmically connected to different teachers at different levels. Okay? So those are the first three things you want to look at. Here's some other things. And this makes sense, okay? They know more than you do. Right? It makes sense. If they're going to teach you about Dharma, hopefully they know more than you do. It doesn't mean that you ask a question and sometimes they say, I don't know. That's okay. But basically they know where they're leading you. Okay? They love to teach. They have a great deal of compassion. They never tire of any question anybody has to ask. Like that. So these are just some basic guidelines. Let me see if I missed anything. I think I got most of the... And then the other thing is there are, and you can read more in detail about the different things that they have, right? These qualities. And it's good to know the different qualities so that you know, when you, what I would say is, it is helpful to shop around, seriously. So my own path, I'll interject here, is in 1987, right 26 years ago right now, this is when I did my first course, Kopan Monastery. I wasn't looking for anything or anyone. I wasn't even on a spiritual path. I had a religion. I was quite satisfied with that. Stumbled upon a course, and a 10-day course in Nepal. I was traveling and met Lama Zopa Rinpoche at the end of the course. He came, and I didn't know Guru or anything. I wasn't looking for anything. I didn't, but I was very intrigued by him and had a meeting with him. And so for me, it's also about what kind of disciple are you? There's qualities of the disciple as well as qualities of the guru. But what I would say is, when I later, much later, a couple of years later, found out about these things, I kept checking him. You know, I didn't just meet him and say, "Oh, you're my root guru." I didn't even know what those words were. I didn't, you know, the word guru wasn't even in my mind. I just met this person, was very intrigued by them, heard a lot of interesting stories about him, and was kind of like, huh. But the thing is, what happens is you have a karmic connection. Your guru knows who you are. The problem is we have a lot of obstacles up, mostly from the unhealthy parts of our ego. And our ego, those unhealthy parts of the ego, we've been talking about this all week, right, is terrified of getting destroyed. Terrified. So what it does is it keeps throwing darts to you to avoid you from meeting the truth and meeting something really pure that will free you from your suffering. So more and more and more now, I meet people all the time that are like, how do I meet my teacher? I'm ready. I want to know how I meet them, but they haven't really met anybody yet. You know, and oddly enough, there's a little bit kind of less teacher, not really less teachers around, but there, bless you, there was kind of the generation that was born in Tibet of lamas, these traditional Tibetan lamas. Most of them did not speak English, and when I got into the Dharma, they were all alive and in their 60s. Some were younger. Lama Zopa Rinpoche was in his early 40s. Okay, so they were healthy, vibrant, and they traveled all over the world, and they came to our centers. And within 5 years, I started living and working at centers. Within 5 years of meeting the Dharma. Okay, so we invited them. I lived in San Francisco, but when I first met Rinpoche in Nepal, I came back to the States after that and thought, well, that was a nice fad, that Buddhist course. That was fun. And, you know, back to my life. And when I went back to my life, something had shifted. So you know this kind of saying, for me it was all about, a friend of mine said this to me that I was in Tibet with on this trip, and he said, sometimes you know too much, right? And I couldn't go back to the way it was. And initially I couldn't go back to the way it was, sadly, for me, because I was really distraught. Because my whole life that I had known and all my friends, I didn't enjoy it anymore. And before that, that was my life, and it was great. I wasn't having any trouble. I wasn't looking for anything. And then something happened, and as one of my Italian, I've heard this Italian guy that showed up at a teaching once, he said, "The lamas have ruined my samsara." Right? That's what it's like. Yeah. And honestly, it's tragic in the beginning, because you're lost. You don't have a Dharma community. You don't even know about the Dharma. You know, you met this jewel, you got this jewel, and somebody tossed it into your hands, and it's kind of all covered up and gunky, and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. You know, what do you want me to do with this? How do I polish it? You know, looks like a rough stone right now. What do I, you know, so you're kind of lost, and your friends are making fun of you, and what were you doing at the monastery? And, you know, when are you going to get a job again, and come and work with us, and come drinking with us, or whatever you're doing. And so you try. This is what I did, is I went back. There's my old boyfriend, move in with me, marry me, we'll do this. We'll do, I just emailed him a photo of the Boston City Hall today. I just remembered that. We lived in Boston in 1979. We had a great time. I was with him most of my 20s. And I just couldn't do that. I'm just like, I don't know, you know, if I can do that. You know, fortunately I had something burning in me, like I knew I was not going to be happy with him or marrying him. I just knew that I wasn't going to do it. But here was everything, easy. You know, you can have another job, you can do this. It was all set, and I just kept trying to re-engage with what I had left like 6 months before, 8 months, 9 months before, and it just wasn't satisfying. So that was a hard time. And so then I in that transition, I moved to San Francisco from Washington, D.C. You know, I didn't intentionally move. I got a ride cross-country with another friend. I was like, great, I'll take a ride, I'll visit some friends in California, and I'll come back, and I'll do this job. That's what I was going to do. So I went out to California. I slept on one friend's couch, Southern California, 2 months, went up to Northern California, slept on another friend's couch for 2 months, got temp jobs to pay the rent, temp jobs, and 2 months later in San Francisco. I intended to come back to the East Coast. I was actually on my way back, thinking to make plans, and then I got a real job with a magazine. I mean, I interviewed as a fluke, like they won't hire me. I was like, this is a cool job, I'll do this, and they hired me, right? So then I was based there 17 years, California. But what I did was, when I got out there, and it was very, very groovy, California, okay? After being, like, basically held hostage in Washington, D.C. for 9 years, California was like a breath of fresh air. It was like, wow, Now that I've moved back to the East Coast, I remember why I moved to California, right? It's very different. And there are pros and cons of both coasts, very much so. Good and bad things about both coasts, and I prefer to just, let's focus on the good things. But it was really fun when I got out there. And there are all these Dharma centers, many, many Dharma centers, Hindu ashrams, yoga centers, all kinds of things, Vipassana centers, and Tibetan Buddhist centers. So living in San Francisco, I just started exploring and going to different sittings, and this course, Saturday night here, these people, met some people. It was great, it was really interesting. And Lama Zopa had a center about 1.5 to 2 hours south of San Francisco. Wasn't convenient, I didn't have a car, but somehow after a few months I got myself down there, and that took hold. That was just my Sangha. I just felt more comfortable there. I kept checking these other places and but that just felt at home. And even after I met Lama Zopa in Kathmandu at that time, there were many other centers right there, and I went around with some other students, checked out these teachers, checked out this person, and somehow, so he knew, I know now looking back, he knew, he knew I was one of his disciples. But, they don't have to say that. It's better for our thing for us to check out and come back and be sure. And no, I never had some people have a thing where they meet a teacher, and after a while, after a few years, they will say, will you be my root guru? I never had that with Rinpoche. I never had any major, the first time I met him I was very disrespectful anyway. I didn't understand, and I did my best, I just didn't know, I didn't have that kind of tradition so basically, it's very helpful to really thoroughly check this person out. If you're interested in taking a teacher, is shop around. There's a lot of centers around here, and look around for some people want someone they can see regularly and be able to get advice from. Some people are okay because this person's a great Rinpoche and they come in once a year or whatever, but I got an appointment and I feel a connection, and I took refuge with him, and and I know there's one Lama who will be here this summer and at Milarepa Center, and he's my age. He's young, right? I say he's young, right? But for the Lamas, he's young. I mean, he's in his 50s, and I remember when we found out we're like a year apart, and he's like a contemporary to me. He's great, he's great. He's absolutely great. Pari Rinpoche. Dagri Rinpoche is the name written, Dagri Rinpoche. Sometimes we call him Pari Rinpoche. He's wonderful. And some people took refuge with him, and he's just a beautiful Lama. And people like that because they're kind of like, well, he's younger, he'll be around for a while, right? You devote to a teacher now who's 85, and chances are the manifestation's going to change. But the thing is, the catch is, you have a certain root guru. So you can't really control if he's 50 or 80 right now. Or if it's a he or she, or if it's American, or Chinese, or whatever. So the main thing is to find that person, and honestly, that's not an easy path alone, to find that person. And I always have trouble trying to explain this to people because I was never looking for the guru when I ran into him, when I basically slammed into him. So it's very hard for me, I can't quite relate to, well, I've been looking, because I never looked. I just fortunately, so the thing is, what can you do now to create the karma to be open to meet that person? That's what happened. I obviously had very, very good karma, honestly. When I think back, I think I had really extraordinary karma that I met somebody in my 20s, when I was in my 20s, without looking. Like, fortunately, whatever it was, I was ready, I was open, I had many, many karmic seeds of that, and then, bam, slammed into them, and they knew, and they were able to take me in these meetings and open my eyes and get me to pay attention. You know, I mean, he did something in the first meeting, read my mind, just because I'm so thick, just to get me to wake up, to kind of, like, huh? You know, maybe I should pay attention to this. This is different, right? So I was very fortunate that way, but many people I know, I took students in Santa Cruz that kept asking, because then we had Rinpoche Rinpoche living there, Lama Zopa Rinpoche living there. There were many great lamas that came every year, and I brought these students to meet these lamas, because I'm like, this is a qualified guru. They're all my gurus, all these people, right? But some of them passed away now. So I went, and one of them sat, and she got all these instructions. Two students came, they got all these instructions from him, and then one of them really never put stuff into practice, and kind of, you know, and so from your side, you need to make some effort from your side. Basically, I say cultivate the relationship. You know, so what's that like? Well, and this is something I find Americans aren't quite willing to go to that length, most of them. It's hard for us, okay? But mainly it's like, try to attend the teachings, okay? Chöden Rinpoche is going to be here this year. Dagri Rinpoche is going to be here this year, right? These are amazing lamas. These are not ordinary beings. I heard Lama Zopa Rinpoche once basically talking about Chöden Rinpoche, that he basically was saying he's a Buddha. So he's going to come to this room and teach in this room. So be there. Don't miss that. Okay? Now he might not be your guru, and he's in his 80s, and he's a very different manifestation, very still, very different than Dagri Rinpoche. Like I said, they're all different. Dagri Rinpoche is very extroverted and outgoing. Chöden Rinpoche, unbelievably still. Like that. So you can ask for appointments, you can, if you have a significant question, maybe there's some kind of ceremony, you can see, you know. Again, don't jump. Don't jump, but check them out. Try to see, you know, what kind of qualities do they have? Something you can think about. You can check other centers or, you know, different things like that. There's a lama in Connecticut, Kensur Rinpoche, Geshe Lobsang Jampa, Reading, Connecticut. They have a center. Beautiful lama, older lama. He's beautiful. Sweetest face. Very different, right? Very different. So what you do is you have to make effort from your part to show up at the teachings. And frankly, these teachings, they're not going to be long. So like, there were teachings that came to California, and I made sure I was at every teaching. You know, I really, this is the effort. This is like what creates merit. So it's your choice. Do you want to get free of your suffering or not? It's totally up to you. I'm not forcing you and saying you need to be, it's just, you know, and one teacher really gave me this explanation. We took a Manjushri initiation from him. Manjushri is the Buddha of infinite wisdom. Okay, so we took a Manjushri initiation years ago in California, and at the end he said, and you know, people ask sometimes and say, with initiation sometimes come commitments. Meaning for the rest of your life, you have to recite this many mantras of that Buddha. Okay? It's for your mind. It's not to make a problem for you, right? So what we think is we go, oh, I have to do that practice every day. Forget it. Like, I'm not doing that. Oh, we go, oh, I don't want to. It's for your freedom. But see, because of obstacles and obscurations, karmic obscurations, you know, we planted seeds that create obstacles from you meeting your teacher, and is we also have obstacles to seeing that the practices and advice they give us is to free us. It's not to make more work for you. Like, this is the path that frees you. Not all the internet surfing and the watching TV and the garbage, whatever. Right? We have time. We do all that stuff. But somehow, this practice that takes 10 minutes, no, I don't want to do that. So he said once at the end, he said, and the commitment is to recite one mala, rosary, it's a mala, one mala of the Buddha of Infinite Wisdom's mantra, Omara Patsanadi. So eventually you say, more quick, Omara Patsanadi, Omara Patsanadi, Omara Patsanadi, right? So every day I do a mala, and that was the commitment. And then he said after that, he said, so if you want wisdom, if you want a lot of wisdom, then you recite a mala every day. If you don't, then don't. So it's, you know what I mean? It's practical common sense.
Yeah.
Okay, but what happens is we have obstacles. So it's because you have obscurations that you don't see that advice or that practice or what they're telling you as beneficial. You see it as burden. So vows as well. There's different vows that they give, and I'm not going to get into a whole discussion about the vows, but you can take refuge precepts. If you take refuge, there's 12 refuge precepts. They're like vows. If you like, then you can take bodhisattva vows. And then there's 18 root vows, 46 secondary bodhisattva vows. That's a lot, right? They make sense. There's tantric vows, okay? Then you can take ordination vows. You can take lay vows. So when I got ordained, my lay friend said to me, oh, so now you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, right? And I know I had some of those thoughts in my mind, right? But then I realized actually the vows free me. I'm quite free right now because of my vows. Now I'm a happy nun. So there are people that do, right? There are people that feel restrained from the vows. Okay, so fortunately for me, my path has worked out for me and I'm happy. This was my choice. No one forced me to do it, but I'm happy doing it. I do have friends that are not that happy ordained. But I'm happy, and because I do realize the vows free me. They really do. They get me closer to enlightenment. So I'm delighted. Thank you so much. I don't need all that gunk out there that I was doing before. And it's not a bad thing. You can be a great lay practitioner. You don't have to be a monk or nun. But I'm just saying, it's a perspective. And a lot of time we see the advice they're giving us. Lama Zopa Rinpoche has a reputation, as we know. He's actually the strictest teacher I have. I have 30 gurus, different teachers, different levels. He's the strictest. He's the most intense. And I say thank you so much because he has definitely so benefited my mind by being strict. Right? Is it hard sometimes? Yeah, you bet it's hard. But so Rinpoche's thing is, his thing for his disciples, and this is just one type of teacher, he says, what I'm most interested in my disciples is how they bear hardship. Okay? Why? His name is Zopa. Zopa means patience. Forbearance. That's his job. That's how he manifests, as patience. So what he's going to do is keep throwing at me ways so that I develop patience. So that's my job this life, because I have very little patience. Right? So fantastic! Like, thank you so much. I have a teacher named Patience, who's showing me my mind. Right? So all he's trying to do is put people in situations to see how you bear up, because it helps you purify, it helps you get stronger, get a strong mind, to develop infinite patience and things like that. But each teacher's different. Each teacher's so different. All the teachers I've had. Some were so like, people come in crying after retreat. He'd say, go to the beach in Thailand. We were on retreat in Dharamsala. He'd say, big smile, through translation, go to the beach. So, just different manifestation. It wasn't like he was any less qualified. It's just we need different things sometimes. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche's reputation, some people get the courage up. I used to say courage, now I think get the wisdom up. They get themselves together and they ask Rinpoche for their lifetime practice. Meaning, you have some nundro. Nundro are preliminary practices. And what they do is they clear the way for you to progress along the path. And they set up all the conditions for you to progress along the path. Right? And then he can give you your meditational deity and some particular practices of what to meditate on in the Lam Rim. And what he does is, maybe it's 5 pages, computer pages, printed out, standardized, most of it. I've read it. I've seen people's practices. They bring me their practice. Can you help me do this? So it's like 5 or 6 pages standardized, but then there's spaces, and he writes, and his assistant writes in, because he checks it specifically for you. So what happens is, some of the nundro could involve, not necessarily for you, making 100,000 prostrations, reciting 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras, offering 100,000 water bowls, you know, and on and on. There's many different practices, and there's 9 in our tradition. You know, it could be reciting a certain sutra. You know. And so what happens is people don't want to ask because somebody got where, you know, they had to recite 500,000 Vajrasattva mantras. So that takes a really long time. But it's a lifetime practice. Wouldn't you want to know your practice?
Yeah.
Rather than, and what happens is you get these instructions, and then you ask a senior student to help you explain, how do I do this? Now there's practice books for all these practices, all clearly explained. Visualization, mantra, everything. Right? Some of them even have accompanying CDs, of audio CDs. So, fantastic. So, when you want to know that, rather than, you know, having some, you know, kind of put together a little bit of this and that, and I say, wouldn't you really want to have the best thing for you? Again, you have to slowly think about it. Come to it. It takes people, so, you know, Rinpoche sometimes gives a lot of that practice, but it frees you. And then you're set for life, and then you got your thing, and certainly you could check back in when you finish some stuff, but basically, most of it takes people most of their life like that. And a lot of people that really started doing it started having incredible opening to the Dharma. Great meditations, great, you know, really progressed pretty quickly. Quite interesting. So it's something to just think about. So I'd say check the qualities, a little bit understand your relationship with freedom, right? Your own path. What are you willing, how far are you willing to go? And granted, you have to be practical. If you're raising school-age kids, and you have a partner, and a full-time job that you need for the mortgage, for the house, you have to be practical. You know, you can't go over to India for 3 months. Maybe that doesn't work to do a retreat. Question?
Do people actually count how many times they do?
Do they count?
Do people? Oh,
It's not on.
okay.
Thank you, Wendy.
Okay. It's on now.
Someone asked to do like 100,000, whatever. Do people actually count those?
Oh, absolutely. I've counted many, many, many. I'm trying to finish my nundro, but some of them I've done twice. And you count, I had a little piece of paper, and you count in all elaborate ways. Everybody's always like, what do you use to count? You know, what do you, because you lose track all the time. But, you know, I know I was on a retreat with a woman that had a group retreat, and she had a stainless steel counter to count her, you know. Yeah. So what happened is, this particular deity retreat had different mantras. One mantra was very long, so it was just, you know, occasionally. But one of them, it was very short, and she started to click on every mantra, and she was right in front of me, and I'm like, Sue, I love you to death, but bury that thing. You're driving me crazy. You know, it's just funny, but people, what I did is some of them you count really quickly, and I had like little pebbles, and I would move one. Because you don't want to really distract yourself in each thing, you really want to be meditating and visualizing. So I would just finish a mala, and I'd just move a stone, and when I got 10 stones, I make a little line on a piece of paper, and then I move them back, and then I make another line. But you count, yeah. You count so that you know when you got to 100,000. So it's not the rest of your life, right? Yeah, but it's good, and I've noticed that when sometimes a teacher gives you 30,000 refuge things to do, or 50,000 of this, and so I notice when I have finished like 100,000 of something, it's definitely shifted something in they definitely have an effect on the mind. And it also seems to purify the elements the body's made up of. Okay? We're made up of fire, water, earth, air. So water bowls is the water element you're cleaning. Dorje Kadro is a burning offering, so you're purifying fire element. Tsatsas, you're dealing with plaster or clay is the earth element. And they have different effects on the mind. Water bowls, water is very emotional. So I did the water bowls. You don't have to do in a retreat. You can do every day at home. But when I did water bowls, I happened to do in a retreat setting for 6 weeks, 6 to 7 weeks. I just did them solidly 12 hours a day. And 2 weeks into it, and I'm not an emotional person that much, I just wanted to cry. You know, I was like, what's going on? I was just so emotional. And 75% of the time I wanted to cry, and 25% of the time I was crying. And then once I finished the water bowls, after 2 weeks it subsided. Just the water washing stuff through me like that. So some of the things I've done after I met Rinpoche, but with some of my gurus, some of the stuff I did was I visited them where they live in India many times. I've taken myself, spent the time, spent the money, went to a certain teaching that was happening. It was just last December I did the same thing with Geshe Tenli, and we went around and brought request letters from our centers and went around after the teaching. We sat through, I don't know, 4 to 6 hours of teachings a day in very cramped space, and then in the evening we went around and visited these teachers, and you wait and you have to get an appointment and you have to wait, and sometimes they go, no, come back tomorrow. And sometimes we had to find where they were living. We were in between 3 monasteries. And it was like taking a taxi here, and then Geshe and I'd meet, and we'd be like, I don't know, do you think he's at this house at Ganden? And they're like little cities, the monasteries. Sometimes people didn't know, we'd find, and we'd wait, and then you have to wait, and there's a big long line. And that's what people do to really pick, because the teacher's everything in Tibetan Buddhism. This is another problem we have. The teacher's everything. Okay? So, as Americans, and we're not all Americans here, but I find our culture in particular, we have a lot of disrespect for authority. A lot of it may have come from the 60s. Seriously, I know my generation, I'm kind of at the end of that generation, but it was always question authority, it was a renegade culture, and there was a lot of bumping up against who was in charge, and so that's the way I grew up, and so I grew up with a lot of disrespect like that to people in those positions. And so I was disrespectful to Rinpoche when I first met him. In the Tibetan tradition, it's exactly the opposite. And even the way I see Tibetan families and the way the kids treat the parents and the way the parents treat the kids, it's not like American families. Kids are so disrespectful to their parents. I'm amazed. I don't know if they learn it in school or where do they learn it? Because we were like that with my parents, and and it's in Tibetan kids, rarely do you see that. They get smacked. I mean, it's just something culturally, it doesn't really happen, and it's not tolerated if it does happen. It's like you respect your elders, and you really respect your teachers, and it's amazing when you see. I remember the first few times I witnessed, and I was like, wow, it's family, the kids just very disciplined, and they speak and they interact. But it's very interesting. So when your teacher, your spiritual teacher, your guru is the highest manifestation of that. And so there's many things to even learn, for instance, now at our level. And so here's one example that the center does teach and things like that. Our centers try to teach Dharma etiquette. And I am not on any trip here, but they put me on a throne. And the reason is I'm not on any kind of thing that I'm like, oh, I should sit up high. But out of respect for the Dharma, you always have the teacher off the floor. Any teaching on the Dharma. Lay person doesn't matter. You should always have it elevated out of respect for the Dharma and who they represent. The teacher, like that, the guru. Always. And so there's different heights of thrones and things, but that's just out of respect. If your center can do it, some centers, like we have a very low little attic place, our gompa. So our throne is lower, obviously. But it's still raised, it's still higher than the students. So if, like, you'll notice this year when Dagri Rinpoche's here, when Chöden Rinpoche's here, Chöden Rinpoche will be on a higher throne than Geshe Tenli, because he's a higher status, but Geshe should be higher than us, right? And so out of respect, and then if you have other teachers, you might put them on a couple of cushions, just out of respect, that they're just not, it's not ordinary, you know, that they're a little bit like that. And it's very good to get your mind into habits like that. So for instance, when the teacher comes in the room, regardless of who they are, everybody should stand up. It's just the Tibetan tradition, right? And then normally what they do, and it's good to get in habits when the Tibetan teachers come, is you would stand like this. Some people bow down, you know, a little bit, but that's okay, just stand respectfully. The main thing is to have a respectful attitude. That's the main thing. It doesn't really matter what you do with your body, but the body mirrors what's in the mind sometimes, okay? So you stand, they come in, they make 3 prostrations, they sit down, okay? After they sit down, you make 3 prostrations and you sit down. Like that. That's the real protocol of how it's done. You don't have to make prostrations, not at all. But you would wait, stand, and then you'd sit down, like that. So a little bit, what happens when we come to that is you start to see your relationship, and what it does is it humbles you, and it cuts pride. Because we're always kind of like, well, you know, who are they? That was my initial thing. My first course at Kopan, people were making prostrations. Not everybody, because it was a beginner's course, and there were 70 people. Lama Zopa came. And probably half of them made prostrations, and half didn't. And I didn't. I stood and I watched, and I kind of was like, had a little thought of like, oh, everybody's on some kind of trip. Really, that was probably my first thought. If I can think, I was a little bit like, okay, yeah, that's what they do here. Oh, I ain't bowing down. Oh no, you know. So I observed, but I just observed, you know. And then a little bit my mind softened where I didn't judge. I just kind of was like, okay, well that's cool, they want to do that. You know, I didn't feel comfortable to do that, so it's okay. So a little bit, you see, and you slowly, there's no jumping, don't leap at anything. You just slowly observe and see. And I remember my first prostration, you know, when I first did that. It wasn't to a teacher, I was just at the temple, this temple in Lhasa, and felt like I would try that. And you know, something ripened. Honestly, it was Sakada, was the holiest day of the year, one of the holy days of the year. Lama Zopa led this huge group, 60, 70 people, to Tibet. I wasn't even a Buddhist. I tagged along, changed all my plans, went on this trip, didn't understand anything about the Dharma, and was 3 weeks in Lhasa with Rinpoche, and every day there were pujas, and he'd take us around to these incredible holy places and explain. And I was always at the back of the line, and all the older senior students were, you know, shoving in. They wanted to be right near Rinpoche and hear everything, and I didn't understand half of what was happening. But somehow this holiday came, and Rinpoche gave us instructions, what mantras to say, what to do. You get up at 4, go to the temple. Somehow I went, I don't know, some kind of seed obviously ripening, and that's when I decided to make my first prostration with these old Tibetan women in front of the temple, disgusting on the ground, and I laid my little shawl out, and I looked around, because in the religion I was raised in, it's forbidden to bow down. It's the worst thing you can do, is to bow down. So I thought the sky was going to fall in. I was really convinced that, like, this is going to be really, really bad. You know, but I thought I'm just going to try it, because, you know. So I remember I looked around just in case. I didn't want anyone to photograph me. Because I thought if that photograph got out and, you know, somebody saw it, that I bowed down, you know, it was the worst thing I could do. That's how I was raised in Jewish religion. Never bow down. Right? So I made one prostration, and it felt so good. You know, I was like, that was it. I was like, wow, that was interesting. But then it kind of broke the ice. And so again, the respect to the teacher is, you know, initially you try something. So here's the thing about advice. Here's the thing about advice and protocol, basically. So people ask for appointments with teachers, and they want to talk to a teacher, and perfectly fine, and they want to get some advice, they want to talk something out. So the main thing is there's someone who schedules appointments or could, and I've been very, you know, I'm here, so people ask me, you know, okay, it's easy. But technically, what you do is basically in the ancient days, you'd always come with a gift, you know, some kind of offering. You'd never think to see. So usually when I see my teachers, I bring a kata, an offering scarf, and I have an envelope that I put money offering in. and I might have something separate, flowers or fruit or something. You know, always come with something. That's really, you know, they don't need it. It's not that, it's just the respect of you're offering something for their time. And when I think about it, a number of people in Vermont come and talk with me and they make an appointment, and sometimes I'm with them for an hour, you know, up there. And you go to a psychiatrist or a therapist and you offer like 120 bucks. When you think about it, right? So it's really about, this is somebody, this is the most precious person befitting your mind. So, you know, so that's something, normally with protocol, that's what we would bring. And then some people formally, when they go to see a teacher, with the Tibetan teachers, they would come into the room and you put your offering to the side and you make 3 prostrations, then you come up to them and I'd offer the kata, and you don't hand them the envelope, ever. You just put it on their table, like that. And then they put the scarf around your neck. That's the kind of traditional way, like that. And then, so what you do is have your questions organized when you go in, and don't waste time with a lot of your story, you know, and get more direct with the questions. You can give a little background, but people just go on, and so mainly the thing is, be very careful what you want to ask, and be prepared to follow their advice if you're going to ask them for advice. Because you will create obstacles to meeting and keeping a teacher and devoting properly if you ask the advice and then you never intend to keep it. You just want to kind of their time and you wanted to hang out, like that. So the main questions you would ask would be about your practice, serious practice questions, about a major health issue, or some kind of recurring health issue, or a major life issue that's going on in your life. Those are the main things to bring to the teacher. You know, not kind of what color car to buy, and you know, things like that. So the main things that you think they can guide your mind through. And then the main thing is, some people might have a little notebook to jot down but basically be prepared to follow the advice and to jot stuff down. I've seen people where they're listening to me, and I can tell none of it's going in. And then later they ask me again, so what was the practice? You know, that's not really appropriate to do that. It's like pay attention and write it down, and is really helpful. I mean, I'll put it this way, that's the best way to devote and to serve. And the best way to at least create the conditions to set yourself up to be able to meet your guru and to be able to serve them well and be able to be a good disciple for them. So if they give you some advice that you don't think you can follow, right then be very sincere and just say, I don't think I can do that. I'm really having a hard time with that. And if you leave the appointment and haven't thought about it and you think about it later and later feel that way, just somehow send a note, write an email, phone, and just say, I don't really think I can do that. That would really disturb my family or really upset. That's okay. It's different than just disregarding the advice and, oh, I'm going to ask somebody else. I didn't like that advice. So don't do that. That's very damaging to your finding the right teacher. I know people that they didn't like what that teacher said, so they went and asked the same question as somebody else. And then what they did is they got conflicting advice. And then they get confused and then they start having doubts. And they'll say, well, they're not really a qualified guru. They gave me different advice. They're just doing it because your mind doesn't want to hear the truth. So they're going to try to give you something else that you might be able to hear, might be able to do. I know people that really got kind of really confused from that, asking different people like that. Yes?
Venerable, I wonder if you have any advice. I was once given some advice from a teacher, a guru, and I did stick with it for some time, and then I allowed life's obstacles to get in the way, and haven't continued it for some time. I know it's somewhat different from making commitments, or making vows. So would that be something that one could just resume, you know, and purify and, you know,
just start again, just get started, and absolutely, like one of the things I found really key, and maybe, with many, many lamas now, is you might get some advice. And I know a woman, one lama showed up and then he gave her like a lot of practice, and she was really like, I don't know how I'm going to, but she started. She just got intense. She just said, this is really overwhelming, but I'm just going to get started. And I have hundreds of thousands. I'm just going to do 100,000. I'm going to just get that done and see how it feels. And she got started, and she was so diligent in her, and she got to like 50,000. And then somehow she was on it wasn't a strict retreat. She was kind of studying, and she saw the teacher again, and then the whole thing changed because she had so diligently gotten started, and all the numbers went down. And he's like, oh, you did that so well that you don't really need to do anymore. So I would say just get started again, and because in your mind, the main thing is in your mind that you haven't just said, I'm not doing it anymore. It's more like, I intend to do it, but now I got these other things in the way. That's really common. But as long as your mind doesn't drop it, that you're like, I really want to get started again. In fact, I'm going to make a date that's the date I'm going to start. So that's really helpful. And then just keep going, yeah. And maybe make it smaller, the amount you do every day, so that it's manageable. Keep it really simple. When you've got a baby and work and stuff, then just break it down, keep it very simple, so that at least you got a little consistency. Then you can do like that. That's fine. Totally fine. So, yes?
Thank you.
Yes, I have this question. There's a different image in Tibetan. So when you take a vows, you take a refugee, it's okay to have a different teachers?
Yes, good question about lineages. There's 4 lineages in Tibetan Buddhism. Okay? The Nyingma or Nyingmapa, the Kagyu or Kagyupa, the Sakya or Sakyapa, and our tradition, the Gelug or Gelugpa traditions. They all are Mahayana. They're all focused on getting enlightened to benefit others. They have different teachers. They have slightly different methodologies. They all have variations on the Lam Rim. They call it different things. They have slightly different completion stage practices, higher level practices. So what I would say is it can get confusing if you're mixing lineages in the beginning. So try to get your main advice from stick with one teacher and one lineage. I have teachers in all the lineages, but my main practice advice and my main study and all that comes from one lineage. Also, you may not want to go through a translator, so then find a Lama that speaks your language. I have the good fortune, my main teacher speaks my language, speaks fluent English. I have gone to other teachers at times when Rinpoche wasn't available and got a translator, and they explained through that. But I wouldn't take my deepest personal stuff to somebody like that because I don't want the translator in between. Partly because sometimes the translation gets a little muddled. And I'm kind of like, is that what he really said? So I would say to try to stick to one lineage in the beginning. If you've already gotten advice in another lineage, try to do that well. It does, some of them are very, very similar, the lineages. They have Nundro and other lineages as well, like that.
So you stay with this one lineage, then if the other teacher are also very beautiful, you would like to learn, it's okay?
Yes, then it's okay. But I'd say get a little basis first in one tradition, and then, I did have, I think, was it Lama Zopa or somebody? No, that was all Gelugpa tradition, but sometimes he's told me to take an initiation with someone else. He'll say, go get the initiation from so-and-so.
So is it very important to have the initiation, the first one that is you're going to be more Yomin?
Not necessarily. It depends on your, like if you are burning to have this certain initiation, you really want to have that, or you suddenly see a picture, a poster of a teacher, a flyer, and this is happening, and some people have very strong, they see the picture of the teacher and they're like, I need to be there, they have a dream about the teacher. So then maybe it's something you should pay attention and go to that, like that. If you're really stuck with the guru and you can't find the right teacher and you're not sure, I know people that have put a little prayer, a little piece of paper on their altar with, please, I'd like to find my teacher, could you please clear obstacles, help me to clear whatever obstacles I need to do so that I can meet my teacher. Some people have asked for a dream, could I please have a dream, something significant that would guide me to my teacher. I know a woman that had a lot of money, and she was giving a lot of money to one Lama, and she basically, this is kind of rare, but she basically said, I want to find my teacher, you my teacher, and she kept really saying, are you my teacher? I need to find if you're my teacher. And finally he said, I'm not your teacher, but I'll tell you who your teacher is. And then he directed her to someone else, like that.
Yeah.
So I would really make prayers from your heart is the main thing, is make prayers from your heart. Can I clear whatever obstacles would prevent me from finding that person? First of all, am I even interested in finding that person?
Right.
Is that going to be my path this life? Or am I kind of okay with just the way things are? Is that a little, you know, particularly in this part of the country, that is a little bit radical. Guru devotion, I find, is really radical in this part of the world. You know, this is what I guess I forgot about moving from the East Coast and coming back, is when I came back 4.5 years ago, I teach all up and down the East Coast. And I'm from Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a lot like Boston, but it's very provincial, and it's quite conservative, parts of Philadelphia. So people come to some classes I teach in Philadelphia, and people were asking me, and there's a lot of what I would call closet Buddhists. And because most of my Dharma life was in California, I didn't understand that. I'm like, why don't you tell people at work that you're a Buddhist? But I forgot what the East Coast was like, right? So I think it's a shame, because the thing is, one thing that it reminds me of is Harvey Milk broke out gays and lesbians, okay, by telling everybody to be out with your friends and family and coworkers and neighborhood and community. Why? Because there's gay people all over the planet, gays and lesbians. And you didn't know that the straight-laced accountant next to you in the next cubicle is gay, and you don't like gay people. But he's cool, and you have lunch with him every day. So when he tells you he's gay, well, boy, is that an eye-opener. This guy that you really like, this woman that's your checkout people. So what Harvey Milk tried to do in San Francisco many years ago was get people to be out. So I think as a Buddhist spiritual program, I think because if people like you at work, like, you know, they'll have a little bit of things, but the more they start finding all these people are Buddhists and they're okay, it's, you know, then you can a little bit be yourself. Be authentic and be yourself, what you're doing, and it'll educate them too. It'll have some influence on them. I know it's scary. You know. So Guru devotion is not the first thing you're going to be talking to them about Buddhism if they ask you. It's not. It's the last thing I ever teach people. That's why I'm kind of happy that we have this class tonight. If I have a beginner's class, and when I start a retreat, we're doing a retreat this weekend at Milarepa Center. There's a flyer out there. It'd be lovely for you to join. The last thing I bring up is Guru devotion, depending on the group, unless they're more advanced. Because people can't handle it in our culture. I understand that because I come from this culture. This is my culture. I'm from the East Coast. I know that. You know, my mother was freaked out when I wrote her letters from Nepal at this monastery. She's like, oh my God, they're going to make her shave her head.
She was right.
I mean, I didn't for 13 years, I didn't. Right? But it is scary. I do understand that because I am from this culture and I know that. So I don't discuss Buddhism with people when I worked and stuff unless they asked me. I just was myself. I just was myself. If somebody asked me, oh, what are you doing this weekend? I told them, you know, but I just tried to set a good example. Somebody asked that last night. You know, what's the best way to tell your friends? Just be an example. And you can't proselytize and shove it down their throat. If they're not interested. But Guru devotion, I don't really speak about. That because people get worried. Oh, it's a cold. Oh, they're going to... Oh, my mom used to say, the Swami is coming, you know, or like that. It's just another name for a spiritual teacher in the Hindu tradition, right? But people have fears and things like that. So first, understand your own relationship with that. But I would say it comes at the beginning in the Tibetan Buddhist path, on the Tibetan, and there's a reason for it. This is the shortcut, right? Take the blue pill, right? You ever see The Matrix, right? So the question is, do you want the veil removed from your eyes to see things as they really are, to get wiser, more compassionate? The Guru will do that for you more quickly. That's my experience. Okay, so here's some more personal experience. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I met him. I wasn't looking for anybody. I ran into him. Okay, I have a meeting. quite extraordinary. He reads my mind quite clearly, right? I leave. I go away. I meet him again. I met him again about 1.5 years later. You know, and I met him again. I was very intrigued by him. I mean, I did the course, then I went to Tibet, and I kept checking him out for 3 weeks. I didn't see him every day, but when I saw him, so these are little things that happen to me. This doesn't happen with everybody. I'm just saying, you know, just try to be open, try to be impartial. These are the things about, you can read about what is it about the disciple, okay? You have to be open and impartial. If you come to a teaching with a lot of judgments, you're not letting the teacher in. You're not being open to the teacher. On the East Coast, we have quite a lot of judgments and things, and preconceived notions and things. Open, impartial. How do you listen at a teaching? You know, here's a way to listen. There's a couple different analogies. One is, when you come into a teaching, when I sit down in a teaching with another teacher, okay, is I try to think the teacher is like the Buddha, and the Buddha is the king of doctors and is basically like the doctor. The Dharma is the medicine, and the monks and nuns or the spiritual community supporting it are like nursemaids helping me. So I really want to pay attention so I can really hear what's coming in this medicine so that I can then take that medicine and apply it to my life because it's going to help me. That's what medicine does, it makes you better. And I'm sick, and I'd like to be better. I'm not laying a trip on myself that I'm sick, but I suffer from anger, ignorance, desire, jealousy, pride, depression, anxiety. You know, I have delusions just like everybody else. It's a type of sickness. Okay? So here's the medicine, here's the doctor, here's the helpers. Here are the nurses. Great. Okay? And then how else do you listen? Okay, they say there's 3 faults in listening. What kind of pot are you? There is the leaky pot. Right? The leaky pot. You're there and you're listening, and then you leave the teaching and somebody says, so what did she teach about? I don't know. I don't know. Don't remember any of it. Okay? There's a dirty pot. You know, sometimes I'm in a teaching and my mind is just in the gutter. A lot of distracted thoughts. You're thinking about the garbage TV show you saw last night, or you're really judgmental, really negative, critical, like that, dirty pot. And then there's a pot where nothing can even get in. The lid is on so tight. So again, you try to listen free of the obstacles of the pot, the 3 obstacles they say. So again, this is what's going to help you every time you come into a teaching to clear the obstacles from finding your teacher. Are these kind of things. Be attentive, be open, be impartial. Try to practice what they say. Try to put something into practice from the teaching. Slowly, 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 like that. So one of the things that happened for me was when I met Rinpoche and had this interview, then I heard Rinpoche was leading a trip to Tibet. I had no interest to go to Tibet. I've told this story in here before, I think, so I don't want to bore people with it again. But anyway, I got so confused about, you know, I'm on a trip of a lifetime. I took 6 months off and I went to Asia. Unbelievable trip I had, right? So, you know when you're in something like this and suddenly, like, there's too many options and the mind gets really confused. Mm-hmm. It's all win-win. But now I'm like, totally, after several days of this, I don't know, should I go to Tibet? Might be my only chance. He's going to lead a Buddhist group. It's all these students. It could be a really extraordinary trip, but I'm going to Malaysia and Indonesia, and I'm going to meet this person on the beach, and I'm just enough money, and I don't know what. I mean, this went on for 4 days until I was like a wreck. Should I do this? I have to be back. Will he know? What is it? I don't know what to do. And you know, unbelievable. So then I talked to some of the students, and then I asked some of the students, you know, what should I do? Right? And they all said, you should just ask Rinpoche. Right? So I never had that experience. Ask somebody else what to do with my life, what to do with my trip. Yeah. But I was asking them.
Right, exactly.
Right? They didn't know. They said, I don't know what to tell you. It sounds great. All sounds great, you know. So, but to ask him, that was scary. Why? Because that was the truth. That was pure. That's how I felt. But I was like, You mean ask the big guy? Like, but that means then I have to do what he says. I could take the advice of the other people and never listen to a stitch of it, which is what I did. But with him, like I understood that thing is don't ask him unless you're gonna put it into print, like do it. So then I got up enough nerve, wrote a letter, and I wrote a saga, right? What a waste of time. Keep it simple. If you write a letter, keep it simple. Like when I said, if you meet with somebody, keep it simple. Tiny little bit of background and get directly to your question. Basically, they'll be able to sort out. And if they need more information, they'll ask you. Like that. But because often there's so many people that want to see teachers, try to think there's other people also. You know, so I wrote my letter, but I didn't know then, so I wrote a long letter, every detail. And in the end I said, I just want to know what's best. You know, Malaysia, Indonesia, Tibet. I got an answer back the next day. Rinpoche wrote, I remember his beautiful handwriting. I wish I'd saved that letter. I don't know where it is. And Rinpoche said, it was the only time I ever got an answer that quickly. He was working on me, right? He knew I was a future disciple. He knew I was going to be director of several of his centers. Like, he, you know, good investment. He knew the whole life. He knew my past life, he knows all my future lives, everything. I believe that. Why I believe it? Because I've checked thoroughly. Now, this was my first check, my letter. That was my first test, okay? So what I did is I wrote the letter, and I got a letter back the next day. It said, Malaysia and Indonesia great, but Tibet best. So now I knew, okay, I have to change all my plans. I think I told this story before. When I went to change my plans, okay. So what I did is they say, if you have a good intention, really good intention, and I did, to go to Tibet, and you're really trying, and I was new on the path, you know, I wasn't even on the path then, right? But the Buddhas make a way for you, they say. They will help. There's Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around us now. We're not pure enough to see them. But so if somebody prays and says, please help me, or they come to more quickly where somebody's requesting. That's how it works. So that's the kind of the power of prayer. It's about connection. It's not like going into church. You don't have to be in a church. It's from your heart, calling out from your heart, making a prayer. You can be silent and do it. And they come and pay a little bit more attention. Somebody's asking for some help. Okay? So I had to leave Kopan, the monastery, and go down and take care of all this horrid business to get to Tibet. You know, and what the business was I had just enough money left in Nepal. I was leaving Nepal in a matter of days, going to Burma for a week, and then going to Thailand, and I was going to have money wired there, which was easy to do in Thailand. It was a very functioning country. I had mail waiting for me in Thailand. I had a friend waiting there that I had met in Nepal, and we were going to spend our birthdays on the beach, and it was all sorted. And then I was going to Malaysia and Indonesia, like that. So in Nepal, during that time, if you had money wired, what usually happened is they would make you wait 3 to 6 weeks, tell you the money was not there, and it was there, and they were making interest off of it. And, oh no, madam, I'm sorry, it's not here. So I need to have money wired. In those days, there was no ATMs, okay? Number one. I'm out of my Nepali visa now. My Nepali visa is taking me just to the end to go to my trip to Burma. And now I have to apply for an extension, and in those days, they wanted to see officially that you changed money at regular banks and not the black market to extend your visa. I had changed all my money on the black market because I got a better rate, but now that I had to extend, because what I could do with my initial visa coming in the country is they didn't need to see it, but to extend, they're going to look at it. And now it's not the trekking season anymore, which means that there's not going to be many people in immigration, and they're going to ask me all these questions. And that means I'm going to have to go change more money, waste more money that I didn't need in Nepal, to show them that I have this. Okay, that's number 2. Then I have to change my Burmese air ticket. And it was the one company that was not computerized in those days. So I don't even know how they changed it, how they were going to do that. But that was like another, I might have to forego the ticket. And then the other thing was applying for the Chinese visa. It was very difficult in those days. You needed a Chinese visa to get into Tibet, like you do today. In those days, there was, apparently the rumor was, there were many people then in Kathmandu going overland. Tibet was very open in 1986 and 87, before the September crackdown. There was an uprising. It was very open, very relatively free, and many people were going to Tibet. It was the great pioneer place at that point, the great frontier. So I kept hearing about people in cafes, and there was one telex operator in Beijing, and they were sick. You had to send a telex. So people I met were waiting 6 weeks to get this visa. And the other thing is, it was expensive to send the telex. You could send up to 6 people together on a telex. So often you'd be in a cafe in Kathmandu, and people would come around to your table and say, "Are you going to Tibet? Is anybody here interested in joining our telex? We're looking for 3 more people." And I just thought, oh, I'm so glad I don't have to do that, because I'm not going to Tibet. I have no interest to go, right? So now I have to go. I have to do the telex, right? I have to find 5 people that want to do this telex, or it's going to be expensive. So down I go to Kathmandu, and I get money wired in 3 days. The money's there. I find someone going to my friend's guest house in Thailand who takes a message to them. They changed the Burmese air ticket. I have no idea how they changed it, but they changed it. Okay, they came back and they're like, "Here's your ticket, madam." Great, done. So then I go to immigration. And I'm kind of thinking, this is really easy. Like, I never thought this would happen. Like, somehow somebody was like helping me. Felt like somebody was helping. So I go to immigration, and I'm thinking, okay, so I'm just going to have to spend some money here. And there's nobody there, there's no lines. And there's a little window in the old days, this old place. And I'm thinking, should I lie and tell them I got sick, and maybe they'll take pity and they'll just give me the visa that I need, and what should, and I would like them all, and I said, no, I'll just tell them. And so I looked through the window and I said, "Excuse me, is it possible to apply for, to extend my visa?" And the man looks back out of the window and he says to me, "Madam, would you like a cup of tea?" Never. This doesn't happen in immigration. Never would this happen to someone. I mean, it was really like candid camera. Like, are you kidding me? And I said, okay. Like, I was like, usually they're just like in a rush, and there's a big line, and this, and how many days you want? What come back at 1 o'clock, or come back at 4, or come back tomorrow. And so I walk around this little office, and I sit down at his desk, and he brings out tea, very friendly, and there's people in there, and he takes my passport, and he says, "Okay, how much time do you want?" Slaps it in, the sticker, and that was the end of that. So now it's the telex. Now I'm off to the telex. I fill in my application, I've got the whole thing, I've been to the Chinese embassy, whatever papers, now they give me the paper they approve for the telex. So off I go, and there's one bank in Kathmandu that does this telex. So I decided, I don't have time. I have to get this visa to go. These people I knew were taking a taxi, they were going to leave. These 2 monks, they were going to take me with them to meet Rinpoche, and on and on. And so I decided I'm just going to go to the bank myself, and I'm walking up the little aisle to go to the bank, the little alley to go to the bank, and there's 5 people waiting, saying, do you want to do a telex? We're looking for 1 more person. So then I went to Tibet. So what I did is I followed that advice. That was my first piece of advice. I took the advice, I went to Tibet with the group. I never had a doubt in my mind it was the best thing I ever did. It was an unbelievable trip with Rinpoche. You never have a trip like that, going on pilgrimage with Rinpoche. I didn't know it was pilgrimage. This is something people waited lifetimes to go with him to Tibet. I just stumbled upon, tagged along, and it was extraordinary, right? So then in Tibet, it's very dusty. It was summer, it doesn't rain a lot. It's a 13,000-foot road, the elevation, the road that you're on. It's very high, very dusty, and you're on bus rides with all unscheduled transportation. They had no scheduled transportation. And the road was dust, it was unpaved. It's all paved now, the Chinese have paved it, but it was unpaved. And you basically hiked in to Tibet, and then you got to this area we slept overnight and then got to this place in the morning, hiked up this major thing, like trekking, and we got to this place and there was just a whole array coming out onto some confusion of trucks and buses. That nobody, and everyone would get in one bus, big buses sometimes, and the rumor was this bus was going to leave first. And you'd sit in the bus, and you'd sit for 2 hours, and then all of a sudden that bus would leave. And you didn't know, it was rumors, and you'd be running off of one bus, trying to get on a truck. I mean, so I was with these, initially first these 2 monks, and we went ahead of the group, and then we met the group in Lhasa. So I got an ear infection from the dust. You're just plowing along for hours on these roads. It took 2 to 3 days to get to Lhasa, and we spent a few nights on the road in these other towns. So I got an ear infection from the dust, really painful. I tried to take antibiotics, it didn't do anything. I saw a Western doctor that was on the road with us, and she just said, she didn't know what to do, just leave it alone, you know. So then finally we're in Lhasa, and I hook up with the group with Rinpoche, and we go around these temples, and I was always at the end, because I was new. So, Rinpoche's coming out of a shrine room. He had given everybody these little special pills to take, that whatever, and I was last. And so as he was coming out of the shrine room, I was going in, and so he sees me. And he says, oh, hello. You know? Like again, like when I think back, I'm like, he knew who I was. Like he knew exactly what we were going to do together in this life, and I knew nothing. You know, I was just like, oh, and I liked him. You know, I was very intrigued by him. I felt incredible compassion from him, and I felt love like I never felt from anyone before from him. Unconditional, just blew me out, you know. So I was very intrigued, so I saw him and I said, oh, hello. And he said, how are you? How are you? And I said, you know, in my stupid little limited way, and and I said, I have an ear infection. Because it was so dominant, I couldn't hear out of one ear, totally gone, you know, I couldn't, nothing. And I was thinking, like, is this going to be a problem? And so that was all just, you know, so I blurted out, like, I have an ear infection. And she said, oh, of course, he had 1 pill left. And he said, oh, here, take this. So I took it. Next day, my ear was fine. Okay? Now you can say, well, it would have gone away on its own. Okay, that's what I said. It would have gone away. Like I was very skeptical. Didn't believe anything. I kept checking. I was like, huh. So then he really wanted to get me. And also, when you go to Rinpoche to these temples, it's like this times 100 million. Okay? You go to the temples, and Rinpoche would say, oh, this statue, you'd see a statue like this with a chain across it. People say, why the chain? It flew. The monk who attends, he said it flew once. You know, this statue is talked to the man, told him, this one's growing. I mean, every statue is, you know, and every wall you looked at in the Jokang Cathedral, this is the holy temple in the middle of Lhasa, every wall is covered with something that was naturally emanating from the power of the prayers and the realizations in the Buddhist statues and tankas and the Jowo statue in the center, the holiest Buddha statue in the center. I'm sure there's a picture here of the Jowo statue. It's the holiest Buddha statue, one of the holiest ones in the world. Because of all of that power, magnificent holy power, these images manifest from the wall. A Buddha statue would come out from the pillar on its own, naturally emanating. I saw many of these. You can see these, you know, if you go to these countries. To the point, so I didn't believe any of it. I'm like, somebody carved it. You know, didn't come out on its own. But some of the things look strange. I was like, you know, it looks kind of different. We went into a cave. The whole back wall was covered in Buddhas that had naturally emanated. We also met a monk, a Tibetan monk, in the back of that cave who said, Rinpoche is going on and naturally emanating. And the monk spoke English, and then he rolled his eyes, and he said, I happened to be standing. Of course, I was standing near him, and he said, everything in Tibet is naturally emanating. You know, sarcastically. Right. Yeah, right. So that was my attitude. You know, it's just like, I wasn't, but what happens is I started a little bit, you can be a non-believer, fine, no problem. But the thing is, like, it could be a possibility that these things occur. Right? So initially I didn't believe it at all. I wouldn't even venture into it was a possibility. So, but then I started to get a little bit broken down, a little bit, you know, Rinpoche was working on me. When I look back, he was kind of trying to chip away into my little, you know, that I don't believe this, I don't believe this. And so one day I went to the Jokang. I went every day for 3 weeks. I found the place amazing. This cathedral in the center of Lhasa, this temple, it's unbelievable. If you could ever go there in this life. Shrine rooms, one after another, dark and butter, from the butter lamps everywhere, you know, but unbelievable. All these statues and all the very powerful place. So every day I was fascinated with the place. Every day I'd go and I'd like look through more shrine rooms and this. I had just a couple favorite places. I hung out there and did some meditation. And one day I'm walking around, there's like an outer korwa, they call it, you know, when you circumambulate, and it had prayer wheels, small prayer wheels. And I'm going in the right order, clockwise. And who is in front of me is Lama Zopa, and one of his attendants, John Fay. Okay, John Fay was a past director of Milarepa Center, okay, the center where I live. And he was the attendant at the time, not Roger. So, not Venerable Roger. So I see the both of them in front of me, and I was like, like, wow. Like, and remember, she's just alone with John Fay, very unusual, you know. Usually there's many students around, and many Tibetans also, because they all recognized he was a great Lama. And they had people kind of blocking for him. So I see them, and I was like, oh, this is great. And so she sees me and goes, oh, hello. How are you? And I said, oh, fine. And I called him Lama Zopa then. And so we had a little, like, 1-minute conversation, you know, a little. And that was all. And then he said, okay. He said, you know. And he passes me right here. You know. And so I go on, but he passes me. He's right here. And you know how you turn around, you just want to see somebody again. I just turned to kind of, because I was checking him out. You know, I was being inspired by my guru. I wanted to kind of really see. Like, I was so intrigued by this person. This is really, I didn't know anything about guru devotion then, but I was really kind of looking at him, and so I turned around. Nobody was there. I wasn't on drugs, okay? I was totally not on drugs, I mean, there was nobody there. I have no explanation for that. I have absolutely no explanation. I think he was just, you know, they say Buddhists can manifest in any way. I think he was just trying to get me. He was really, they say they try to hook you, okay? Now, not hook in a bad way, not brainwash him, but if they know that you are a disciple, they want to get your attention sooner in life than later, because it benefits you. That's been my experience. It benefits you. It's just for you. So he was desperate to do anything to get me to pay attention, to get me to wake up. You know, I'm really thick. So, you know, so at that little turning point was a little turning point of like, you know, maybe this stuff can happen. I didn't really believe it, but maybe, you know, maybe it's possible that things could naturally emanate. Maybe it's possible people could walk through walls, they had said. Maybe it's possible, you know, because I started to have some experiences of it. So, you know, I had no explanation, and people had told me other stories, so I was all of a sudden like, you know, like what could you say? It was just breaking me down to get me to just say, just to admit that there might be a possibility. And so I had a few experiences like that, and you don't need to have anything, but basically he was just trying to reach out to me to say, like, you know, I can help you, and some people need a little bit stronger reaching out than others. Some people just believe from the beginning. You know, some of my Asian friends, they have so much devotion compared to Americans, so much devotion in those cultures. So they, from the beginning, believe, you know, they have a belief thing like that, where we ask more questions and delve in more deeply. So my Asian friends, this isn't about blind faith either, but I'm really enamored sometimes with their devotion, their level of devotion, and how respectful they come to the beginning like that. So, so then I slowly, the next year, a year and a half later, I took refuge with Rinpoche in a ceremony at Vajrapani Institute in California, a center I ventured out to and went to many, many years before I became the director. And then I would ask little things to Rinpoche, little things I felt like I could keep and do, and I checked again, another question I liked, and then he gave me the answer, and I followed the advice, and I liked the result. Then I asked another question, something small. He gave me advice, I did the advice, and I liked the result. Then I started to ask a little bit more serious questions. So, and then what I did is I had a job, regular job, and I really wanted to explore retreat and things, so the job was not so great, this job with the magazine. I knew that early on, but they paid me really well, and it was a great job, and so I looked at it in the first 6 months and I said, I'm going to do this for 2 years and I'm going to save a lot of money and I'm going to go back to India and Nepal and really do retreat and spend more time and really study. And I did that for about 2 years. So when I came back from that, and I saw Rinpoche a lot at that time, when I came back from that, I went back to San Francisco, and it was the first time I checked with Rinpoche about like living and working at a center. And then he and another teacher recommended, I was at one center that wasn't going well for me in California, and then he and another teacher both recommended in different ways for me to go to the San Francisco Center, and then I lived there for 3 years, and it went really well. And so then at the end of that, on my own, because it's good to have your own agenda and your own plan, rather than going to teacher and saying, what should I do, it's better to take your ideas to the teacher and say, I'm interested in pursuing my master's in education, or I'm thinking to take this job, or I'm thinking to relocate here. You know, have some idea. It's better for them, they say, to steer a moving vehicle than to just go in like, what should I do? You know, have some plans. I want to do a retreat here. I'm doing this practice, but I'm kind of feeling stuck in it, and I want to kind of do this. And so that then it tells them a little bit. They know where you are anyway, but it tells them a little bit of what you're presenting. So then I think I had asked a question. I had lived 3 years at the center, and it just felt like the karma was finishing. And me and the other woman that lived there wanted to separate, and I decided to move out. I was moving out of what's called the mandala, you know, one of our centers for the FPMT centers, like Kurukulla Center. And I was waiting for some advice from Rinpoche, and Rinpoche advises you exactly when you need the advice. So I was waiting, and I didn't hear anything back. And I was kind of like, And there were other factors going on, of other things happening, but so finally I went ahead and made my own decision and accepted this apartment that this woman and I were going to share, this flat, and was going to move out of the center. And I phoned her. The night I phoned her, because I first saw the apartment 2 weeks before, and she told me she interviewed all these people, but she said, you know, I really want to live with you. So I just said to her, I feel like something big is going to happen for me, and she knew about my spiritual path, and I said, I'm waiting to hear from my teacher, and I said, so I can't accept the flat, so why don't you find someone? If you haven't found someone, in a couple of weeks I'll call you back. She said, fair enough. And so basically I was waiting, and finally after 2 weeks I just was like, I'm going to take the flat. You know, I haven't heard back. It seems like a good scene. I really liked her. She's very spiritual herself, and then I was going to do a totally different track. So I finally call her, and she's very happy, and she decides to pull the ad from the next publication going out, and 2 hours later I get a call about, to be the director of Vajrapani Institute. And what happened is there were other jobs changing. The director was going off to another job for Rinpoche, and all these other factors were involved, which was why there was a delay. And so what happened is I get this call about Vajrapani. I knew something was shifting in my life, right? And I didn't want to go there at all. I didn't want to do that job and live in another community. And I didn't have a great experience living in a community before. And it was a huge job, and it was a lot. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be on my own, have my own thing. So I get this call, and then from a friend, and then I just said, like, oh no, you know, like, this is not what I wanted to hear, you know. So then she said, well, what happens is Rinpoche does divination. Okay, there's lamas that do what's called divination. It's in Tibetan. It's called mo, M-O, and they roll dice. Okay, to answer a question. Okay, people are like, are you kidding me? Right? They roll dice. You can also do a mo on your mala. Sometimes I do mo's for myself, right, to check. And what you do is there's certain numbers that correspond to certain things. And it could be, you know, it's like the 8 ball. Remember the 8 ball? Yes. You know, what would it say sometimes? Ask again, or, you know, too difficult to discern at this point. I always laughed about that. Okay, but basically if somebody has a high level of realizations, I think it's just kind of a device that they use. I think they know what, but this is a way, this is something that they use. And it's interesting because I've done them with malas, and you basically meditate. And you go into a certain space, and you can use it with a deity, and then you ask your question. Very heartfelt, concentrate, and then basically you're pulling your mala apart, or you get a certain number through this, and you count the number, and then the number corresponds, and the number could say, difficult to answer now, or check later, or very, very bad, or very good, or best, right? So she tells me, she says, well, the Mo came out so best that they didn't even bother to check anybody else's name for the job. So when I heard that, and the thing is, he was my teacher at the time. I had already kind of, in my heart, kind of accepted that I knew that the advice he's been giving me for the last few years was amazing. And some things I hadn't really thought about that he'd suggested that really benefited my mind. So when I heard this best, I knew this is what I had to do. Like I knew in here, this is what I wanted to do, but I knew it was going to be hard. But the spiritual, again, this is a Lama, and the spiritual path is about bearing hardship to purify negativities. And life can be hard anyway, right? So I thought about it for a couple weeks, and then I took the job, and it was unbelievably transformative. I would have thought to do it myself. And the community themselves said they hadn't thought of me as the director. I'd been coming to the center, but they hadn't really, posed my name. Rinpoche, the name came from Rinpoche. And sometimes your name gets on a list, you don't even know your name's, that you're being checked for a job, if you're a good disciple, a close disciple like that. So, and it was amazing. I have no doubts it was the best thing for me to do. Halfway through that, I got ordained there, and I was there as the director about 8.5 years, and did 7 months retreat there at the end, and fantastic. And then the next thing I did living in India, Rinpoche and I discussed. So more and more, because I've been at this for a while, I'm pretty clear about what I want to do, because I'm pretty clear about my motivation. So if I stay close to that of wanting to benefit others, and then what I do is occasionally check in with Rinpoche, and then Rinpoche sometimes just makes like a slight adjustment. And a lot of times now he'll say like, oh, very good, and then he'll go, oh, but maybe when you're there you can think about this, or you could do a little bit of this as well, or something like that. But through all those years of slowly asking a question, checking, it developed my faith in Rinpoche, or having a qualified guru. I could see the benefit. I've seen the benefit from my mind. Extraordinary, extraordinary. Would never ever be where I am now if it weren't for the guru, really. And they say all the goodness in your life comes from the guru. Okay? So one thing about guru, or absolute guru, is the guru manifests externally as a being, as a person that you meet, but it's basically just an outer manifestation of the infinite level of your loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom. And sometimes we need an external reminder, right? But it's basically that quality in yourself that you're trying to develop, and they're the ones that shortcut you to that. So when they talk about absolute guru, that's what they're talking about. That's really what the guru is. Is that helpful? Did I just give you some idea, a little bit more about the teacher, and mainly relax. Don't be so ardent with it, but just look at what's your relationship with that, and with your practice. How much you want the volume turned up, how deeply you want to go, how deeply you can't go. Just be honest with yourself, just be sincere. I think that's the best thing. Any last questions? Yes?
Does the teacher need to be ordained?
No. Teacher doesn't need to be ordained. So, in conclusion, may we dedicate excuse me, I'd like to dedicate any positive energy we've created here tonight. And I would like to dedicate all the great classes. I've been here for the past 9 days. I'd like to invest all of that into, for all of us to either be able to connect to a qualified teacher or guru, really be able to devote ourselves fantastically in body and mind and serve them well, and be able to, as a result of that, put their advice and their teachings into practice so we can progress along the path of full awakening and be able to lead all others out of their suffering to full enlightenment as well. I'd also like to dedicate to Francesca Ferdolo, who is passing away, and all the other beings all over the planet who need additional healing. May they receive it immediately and completely. And I'd like, if we can turn to the gold prayer books, I'd like to read the long life prayers for our teachers. One is on page 273. So if you could just share page 273. We're going to chant this in the Tibetan phonetics. Long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. For Lama Zopa Rinpoche, page 279, we'll read in English. You who uphold the Sadhura's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Thank you very much. Thank you. And